Again, the Jews picked up stones to stone him, but Jesus said to them, I've shown you many great miracles from the Father. For which of these do you stone me? We are not stoning you for any of these, replied the Jews, but for blasphemy, because you, a mere man, claim to be God. Here's the setting. It's winter time. It's about mid-December. That's when Hanukkah is typically celebrated. And there is a real political charge in the air. If you go back and find out when Hanukkah started, you go back a couple of hundred, well, about 160 years before Christ. And there was a Syrian king by the name of Antiochus, and he was ruling over Israel at that time. And he was trying to impose Greek culture on the Jews. And he went so far as he took a pig, and you remember, Jews don't eat pork. He took a pig and he sacrificed it on the altar of burnt offerings in the middle of the temple. Well, you can imagine how that infuriated the Israelite people, and it galvanized support around a guy named Judas Maccabeus. And he then led an uprising, and they drove out Antiochus and the Syrians, and there was a period of about 100 years when the Jewish people were politically free. The Romans came in about 100 years later and took over. But what happened is that window of 100 years and Judas Maccabeus, they kind of became a symbol, a preview of what everybody thought would be the Messiah. Well, we read about the history of the Jewish nation, and at the time of Jesus, people felt that the Messiah was coming. So when this man from Galilee came, who was doing all these miracles, he was feeding thousands of people, he was walking on water, he was healing lepers, he was raising the dead, everybody's thinking, now's the time. This is the man. And that's why they come right up to Jesus. And it wasn't maybe even so much an antagonistic question as, hey, if this is the guy, I want to be in on it. And so they ask him point blank, are you the Messiah or aren't you? And Jesus answers clearly. You know, sometimes you'll read Jesus talking about himself and you'll wonder, why didn't he say things a little bit more clear? You know, why didn't he just come right out and say, well, you can't say that today. Okay? You can't say that today. You don't need to be a Bible scholar. You don't need to know Greek or Hebrew or anything else to understand what he's saying about himself. And why do we know that everybody understood it? Come on. Why do we know? Nobody? Yeah, they wanted to kill him. They wanted to kill him. They knew exactly what he said. So let's take a look at what Jesus said, what it means, and what he came to bring. Now, as I said, when you look at these words, he says, I give my sheep eternal life, and they shall never perish. Well, only God can do that, obviously. But then he comes right out and he says, I and the Father are one. Now that's about as clear as you can get. He's saying, I am God. But you know, there's a lot of interesting Old Testament background involved in this. And it's interesting and it's important to know. You remember that in the book of John, Jesus taught, he uses those I am statements. I am the bread of life. I am the light of the world. I am the good shepherd. Okay? He'll talk about I am the vine. You are the branches. All right, that's a very important word right there. It's one word in Hebrew. I am. Probably don't remember. I barely remember. But 3 weeks ago, I talked about a part in John where Jesus was talking to the people. And he said, if you're really my disciples, you will hold to my teaching, and you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. Well, the people that were listening to him thought he was starting to get a little arrogant. And they come up to him and they say, you know, you've got a big, you got an inflated impression of yourself. Do you think that you are bigger and better than our father Abraham? And you know, Abraham, he was the #1 Jew, first Jew. And Jesus says to the people, he says, you know something, before Abraham was, I am. Now there again, you don't need to have a whole lot of Bible knowledge to know he's saying, you know, Abraham lived 2,000 years earlier, and Jesus says, I existed before Abraham was even born. What's he saying? He's saying, I'm God. But there's something even more interesting about this. Now we got to go way back to the Old Testament. You remember Moses? No? Charlton Heston? Okay. All right, remember that picture. Charlton Heston is before the burning bush. I should do that. That makes sense. This Charlton Heston, that's bringing this story down. Moses is in front of the burning bush. And he doesn't want to go lead the people of Israel out of Egypt. He doesn't want to do that. So his first of 6 excuses, get it, 6 excuses, but the first one was this. What's your name, God? If I go and tell the Israelites, God has sent me to lead you out of Israel, and they ask, what's your name? What am I supposed to tell them? And this is what he says, and this is in your outline. I am, tell them, I am who I am is sending you. Tell the Israelites my name is I am. Well, that name, when you translate it into English, is Jehovah. Jehovah. So when Jesus says, before Abraham was, I am, he's basically saying to the Jews, guys, I'm Jehovah. I am Jehovah. And that's why they went ballistic. Because he was saying that the Jehovah God of the Old Testament, whom the Jews had revered, they wouldn't even say Jehovah. They'd say Adonai to avoid doing something wrong. Here is Jesus saying, I'm Jehovah. Now you say, well, what does that have to do with our text? Today, Jesus says, I and the Father are one. Well, we don't have an I am, we have a plural I am, which would be what? We are. I and the Father are one. Now, the Jewish people, they were what we call monotheistic. One God and one God only. And now here's Jesus. In fact, they said, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one God. And now Jesus comes along and says, I and the Father are one. What he's doing is he's describing the Trinity for us, isn't he? Father, Son, he doesn't bring in the Holy Spirit here, but he's saying very definitely there's one God. Just 3 different persons. They didn't handle that very well. As a lot of people today don't handle that. And you'll find people saying, you know, I was brought up in the church, but when they got into that Trinity thing, you know, that doesn't make sense. 1 + 1 + 1 is 3, you know, doesn't make sense to me. And people really pick on that. And I don't know, maybe I'm not bright enough to get it. But I always think, you know, if God is unlimited, if God is infinite, if God is beyond our understanding, why in the world do we feel that we have the right to confine him to our understanding and tell him how he's got to be? I mean, doesn't he have the right to be however he is? And as long as he tells us who he is, that's the main thing.